The desert sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating base Sentinel as I stepped off the transport helicopter, my boots hitting the tarmac with a satisfying thud. The rotor wash whipped sand into tiny cyclones around us, and I had to shield my eyes as I grabbed my gear and headed toward the collection of tan buildings that would be my home for the next 6 months. I could feel their eyes on me immediately. A group of soldiers lounged near the entrance to what I assumed was the operations center, their conversations dying down as they took in the new arrival. I kept my head down, deliberately ignoring the whispers and pointed looks. This wasn't my first deployment, and it certainly wouldn't be my first time being underestimated. Fresh meat, I heard someone mutter, followed by a few chuckles. I pretended not to hear. The thing about military bases is that they're ecosystems unto themselves, with their own hierarchies, unwritten rules, and social dynamics. And when you're a woman walking into a male-dominated unit in the middle of a deployment, you either establish yourself quickly or you spend 6 months fighting an uphill battle for basic respect. I'd chosen a different strategy this time. I'd let them think whatever they wanted. My orders had been deliberately vague when I'd received them 3 weeks ago. Report to FOB Sentinel for temporary duty assignment, they'd said, with minimal details about my actual role or purpose. The Army had its reasons for keeping things quiet, and I'd learned long ago not to question the machine when it was already in motion. The administrative clerk who processed my arrival barely looked up from his computer screen. Name? Jordan Hayes, I said simply. He typed, frowned at his screen, then typed some more. I'm not seeing you in the system for incoming personnel. I'm TDY, I explained. Temporary duty. Should be in a different database. More typing, more frowning. Finally, he shrugged. Okay, whatever. You're in Building 7. Bunk assignment will be posted on the board. Welcome to Sentinel. Try not to die. I'll do my best, I replied dryly. Building 7 turned out to be a converted storage facility that now housed about 30 soldiers in various states of exhaustion, boredom, and frustration. The smell hit me first, a combination of sweat, dust, and the particular musk that accumulates when people live in close quarters without enough showers. I'd smelled worse. I found an unclaimed bunk in the corner and started unpacking my gear with practiced efficiency. Around me, I could sense rather than see the attention I was drawing. No one approached directly, but conversations seemed to orbit around my presence. Who's the new girl? Don't know, just got here. Think she's a medic? Maybe supply? I bit back a smile. Let them wonder. Dinner that first night was an exercise in strategic isolation. The dining facility was packed with soldiers in various uniforms, mostly Army, but I spotted a few Marines and even what looked like a Navy construction battalion engineer in the corner. I grabbed my tray of mystery meat and vegetables that had seen better days and found a spot at a half-empty table. Within minutes, 2 soldiers sat down across from me. Both were young, maybe 23 or 24, with the kind of swagger that came from being deployed just long enough to think they knew everything. Hey, the taller one said, flashing what he probably thought was a charming smile. I'm Specialist Torres. This is Specialist Kim. We haven't seen you around before. That's because I just got here, I said, taking a bite of something that might have been chicken. Yeah, we figured. So what's your MOS? Kim asked, referring to my military occupational specialty. I'm here to help out where needed, I said vaguely. Torres leaned forward. Come on, you can tell us. We're all friends here. You a cook? Admin? Personnel? I could see where this was going. They'd already decided I must be in some support role, something that fit their preconceived notions. Part of me wanted to correct them right there, but the wiser part, the part that had survived 12 years in the Army by picking my battles carefully, kept quiet. Something like that, I said with a shrug. Over the next few days, I settled into the rhythm of the FOB. I attended the morning briefings, sitting in the back and taking notes. I familiarized myself with the base layout, the personnel, the operations tempo, and I let everyone continue to make their assumptions. The new girl became my unofficial designation. I heard it everywhere. Has anyone assigned the new girl to a work detail? The new girl is using the computer in the ops center. Someone should show the new girl where the good coffee is. I was patronized, mansplained to, and generally treated like I'd never set foot on a base before. Soldiers who couldn't have been in the Army for more than a year or two would offer to show me the ropes or explain basic military concepts to me as if I were a brand new private fresh out of basic training. Sergeant First Class Morrison was particularly memorable. A career infantry NCO with the kind of chest full of ribbons that spoke to multiple deployments and plenty of combat experience. He'd appointed himself my unofficial mentor despite the fact that I'd never asked for one. Listen, Hayes, he said one afternoon, cornering me near the operations center. I know it can be tough being a woman out here. Different standards, different expectations. But if you work hard and keep your head down, you'll earn respect. Just takes time. I nodded politely. I appreciate that, Sergeant. You need anything, you come find me, okay? I look out for the support personnel. You girls do important work, even if it's not glamorous. Thank you, I said, managing not to roll my eyes. The truth was, I was gathering intelligence. Not on the enemy, though that was part of my job, but on the unit itself. I watched how the leadership operated, which NCOs actually knew their jobs versus which ones just talked a good game. I observed the social dynamics, the informal power structures, who people actually listened to when things got serious. And I waited. My actual mission at FOB Sentinel was classified at a level that meant only a handful of people on base knew why I was really there. The unit had been experiencing security breaches, nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to raise red flags at higher headquarters. Information was leaking somewhere along the chain, and I'd been sent to figure out where and how. But I couldn't do my job if everyone knew what I was doing. Hence the vague orders, the lack of fanfare, and the deliberate cultivation of a low profile. Let them think I was just another support soldier passing through. Let them ignore me. People got careless when they thought they weren't being watched by anyone who mattered. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their sexism and assumptions were actually making my job easier. By the end of the second week, I'd identified 3 potential security risks and had begun the quiet work of verifying my suspicions. I'd also endured more condescension and unwanted advice than I'd experienced in my entire military career combined. The breaking point came during a briefing on the 3rd Monday of my deployment. The operations center was packed with personnel from across the base. Our battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Richardson, was visiting from the main base to review our current operations and make some personnel assignments. I sat in my usual spot in the back, taking notes on my tablet while around me, soldiers chatted and joked, waiting for the briefing to start. "Attention," someone called as Richardson entered, and we all stood. "Take your seats," he said, moving to the front of the room. "Let's make this quick. I know you all have work to do." The briefing covered the usual topics: security posture, maintenance issues, supply chain updates. I paid attention with half my mind while the other half continued processing the patterns I'd been observing in the unit's communications protocols. Then Richardson got to personnel matters. "We've got some leadership changes coming down the pipeline," he announced. "First Sergeant Martinez is rotating back to the States next month, and we're bringing in a replacement. Additionally, we've got someone here on temporary duty who'll be assisting with some operational security reviews." I felt the energy in the room shift slightly. Everyone perked up a bit, curious about who might be disrupting their routines. Richardson continued, "Some of you may have noticed we have a new face around the FOB. She's been here a couple weeks now, getting the lay of the land." He paused, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. "Captain Hayes, would you stand up, please?" The silence that fell over the room was deafening. I stood slowly, keeping my expression neutral, even as I felt every eye in the room swivel toward me. The shock was palpable. You could practically hear their mental frameworks crashing down around them. "Captain Hayes," Richardson said, a slight smile playing at his lips. He'd clearly been briefed on how I'd been treated and was enjoying this moment. "Is here from the Army's Cyber Network Defense Team. She's a graduate of the Defense Language Institute, has 2 combat deployments under her belt, and specializes in counterintelligence operations. She'll be conducting a comprehensive security review of our operations here at Sentinel." The color had drained from Sergeant First Class Morrison's face. He wasn't alone. All around the room, soldiers who'd spent the last 2 weeks treating me like an incompetent rookie were suddenly realizing exactly how badly they'd screwed up. But Richardson wasn't done. "Captain Hayes came to us from Fort Meade, where she was part of a special operations task force. Before that, she served as a signals intelligence officer in Afghanistan and Iraq. She holds a master's degree in cybersecurity from Georgetown and is one of the Army's top experts in signals intelligence and information warfare." He looked directly at me. "Captain, would you like to brief the room on your findings so far?" I'd been waiting for this moment, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small part of me that was savoring it. "Thank you, sir," I said, moving to the front of the room. My voice was steady, professional, carrying the authority of my rank and experience. "Over the past 2 weeks, I've been conducting passive observation of security protocols at this FOB. I've identified several areas of concern that we'll need to address immediately." I pulled up a presentation on the screen, one I'd been preparing since my second day on base. As I walked through my findings, pointing out gaps in communication security, lapses in operational protocols, and potential vulnerabilities in our network infrastructure, I could see the professionalism settling back over the room. These were soldiers, after all, and whatever their personal feelings or embarrassment, they understood the mission came first. But the dynamics had fundamentally shifted. When I mentioned needing to interview certain personnel about their communications practices, hands went up immediately, volunteering to help, rather than waiting to be assigned. When I outlined new security protocols that would need to be implemented, I saw heads nodding in understanding, rather than the resistance I'd been expecting. Respect, I'd learned long ago, was a funny thing in the military. The institution was supposed to be built on rank and structure, where your position demanded a certain level of deference regardless of who you were as a person. But in practice, respect often had to be earned, proved, demonstrated. Unless you were a man. Then it was usually just assumed until proven otherwise. But I'd played this game before, and I knew the rules. The reveal in the briefing room had shifted me from the new girl to Captain Hayes in an instant. Now the same soldiers who'd been offering to show me where the dining facility was were standing a little straighter when I passed, addressing me properly, treating me like the senior officer I'd been all along. After the briefing, there was a steady stream of soldiers who approached me to apologize, to offer excuses, to explain that they'd had no idea. I accepted their apologies with grace because what else was I going to do? Getting angry wouldn't help the mission, and the mission always came first. Sergeant First Class Morrison was among them, his face a mixture of embarrassment and respect. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for—" I held up a hand. "Sergeant, you treated me the way you thought was appropriate given the information you had. I'm not holding grudges, but I am going to need your help implementing the new security protocols, and I'd appreciate your full cooperation." "Absolutely, ma'am. Whatever you need." Over the following weeks, I completed my security review and implemented the changes necessary to close the gaps I'd identified. The work itself was engaging and important. We discovered that the information leaks had been coming from unsecured personal devices that soldiers were using to communicate with family back home, creating vulnerabilities in our operational security. It wasn't malicious, just careless, and we were able to address it with better training and clearer policies. But the real education, I thought, had been in those first 2 weeks. Not for me. I'd known exactly what I was walking into. But for the soldiers of FOB Sentinel, who'd learned a valuable lesson about assumptions, respect, and the danger of judging someone based on preconceived notions rather than actual competence. On my last day at the FOB, as I packed up my gear and prepared to head back to my home station, Specialist Torres approached me. He was the same soldier who'd sat down at my table that first night, trying to figure out what role I filled. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead, Specialist." "Why didn't you correct us? That first week, when we were all treating you like you didn't know anything, you could have shut it down immediately." I considered the question. It was fair, and he'd asked it with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. "A few reasons," I said finally. "First, my mission required a low profile. The less attention I drew, the better. Second, I learned a lot about this unit by watching how people behaved when they thought I wasn't anyone important. That information was valuable." I paused. "But third, and maybe most important, I wanted to see if anyone would treat me with basic respect and professionalism, regardless of what they assumed my rank or role was. That tells you a lot about a person's character." Torres thought about that, then nodded slowly. "Did anyone pass that test?" I smiled slightly. "A few. Private Chen helped me find the operations center on my second day and treated me like a colleague, not a charity case. Sergeant Williams in the motor pool gave me straightforward answers to questions without any condescension. There were others." I looked at him directly. "You weren't one of them, but you're young. You've got time to learn." "Yes, ma'am, I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do, Specialist." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying me away from a FOB Sentinel, I looked down at the base growing smaller beneath us. Somewhere down there, soldiers were going about their business, probably already forgetting about the captain who'd spent 3 weeks among them. But maybe, hopefully, a few of them would remember the lesson. Respect isn't something you should have to reveal your rank to receive. Professionalism isn't conditional on someone's perceived importance. And the person you underestimate today might be the person you need tomorrow. I'd let them call me the new girl because it served my purposes. But I'd never needed their validation to know my worth. My rank, my experience, my expertise, those existed whether they acknowledged them or not. The truth was always there. They just hadn't been looking for it. And that, more than anything else, was the real security vulnerability. Not in our communication systems or our protocols, but in the assumptions we make about each other. In a combat zone, those assumptions can get people killed. I made a note to include that observation in my final report. Not that it would change anything overnight, The military, like any large institution, changed slowly when it changed at all. But every report, every recommendation, every documented instance of how bias and assumption created real operational problems, it all added up. And maybe, eventually, it would add up to something better. For now, though, I had my next assignment waiting. Another base, another mission, another opportunity to see what I could learn by letting people underestimate me. After all, I'd never needed them to call me captain to know that's what I was.